Happy Halloween! So with Halloween being around the corner, or if it is Halloween, depending on when I decide to upload this video, I've decided that for it, I will talk about something that I think is pretty spooky and scary. And so today, I'm going to be talking about an ARG, more specifically, a Roblox ARG. I mostly wanted to do this because of the YouTuber Senprista, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who has made many videos about Roblox ARGs before. And there's a good chance that if you're watching this video, you probably watched one of his. He's covered so many Roblox ARGs at this point. From stuff like Recall Hollow Heart to I Has a Face Lulz to Seal Directory to Rochaz 313, and the list can just keep going. And I decided that maybe it'd be fun to talk about one for Halloween, so that's exactly what I'm gonna be doing. To decide which ARG I wanted to talk about, I went to the Roblox ARG subreddit and searched through the newest posts that I could find. And one of the first things I found was a behind the scenes for an ARG called XXRadXX. So I ended up finding the channel, and lo and behold, we got an interesting Roblox ARG to talk about. I'm going to organize this video into 3 parts. The first part is going to be the main channel of XXRadXX. The second part is going to be a channel that's associated with it, but is not the main channel, and I will discuss it in a minute. And the third and final part will be a bunch of websites and stuff like that that is associated with this ARG. And one more thing before we get started, I just want to briefly go over the channels that I know and I'm not sure of are part of this ARG. So for the ones I know for sure are a part of this ARG, we have XXRadXX and then 2 other channels that I want to save for later, with one of those channels being the one that I have its own section about. And then the ones I don't know for sure of are Sammy, Ella, and Nomi. Sammy is probably the one I most likely think could be associated with this ARG, but I'm still not sure, because even though he comments on a lot of Rad's posts, he does have a video of his own that feels a bit more distant to what Rad has on his ARG. Ella's here because she's most associated with Sammy and hasn't really done anything with Rad. And finally, Nomi is only on here because in one of Rad's videos, he makes a comment that seems very much like he's associated with this ARG, but then I saw another comment from one of the other channels a part of this ARG, and it didn't feel like that other one. And I think that's everything. So with all this said, sit back, relax, and let's talk about XXRadXX. So I think we should start this video off by covering the main channel that this ARG is attached to, XXRadXX. There's 5 videos on the channel and a few community posts to take a look at, so let's get started. And what better way to start than by taking a look at the first upload on the channel, My Movie. However, just before we talk about it, I think I should give a quick introduction to the 2 characters that are introduced in this video and are going to be very important parts throughout the rest of this ARG. XXRad himself, and Izzy. Starting with Rad himself, he's got a few basic character traits, like liking Roblox and wanting to make games in Roblox to get the front page, and he's also friends with Lizzie and another character we'll meet later. Izzy is very similar to Rad's character traits, except she's got a bit of a complicated family life, that of which we're going to take a look at in this first upload. So the My Movie video opens up with a title card that looks like it came straight out of Windows Movie Maker, and it basically explains what Rad and Izzy are going to be doing, being talking to each other while in the Iron Cafe, which was an actual Roblox game that existed for a very long time, and while it doesn't really look like anything we see in this video, this is just because that's what it used to look like. Anyways, when they talk about stuff, the conversation starts normally, with Izzy trying to do a 360 and Rad teasing her a little bit about how she was supposed to be a noob at Roblox, but then some other friends of her told her how she could be good at the game, and she's now good at the game. However, that conversation very quickly devolves from that to Izzy missing her home and her parents. Like, this is very sudden and very surprising, too. Izzy talks about how she doesn't really like the new people living in her neighborhood, and when Thad asks what's wrong with her parents, she doesn't want to respond at all. However, they decide to move on from talking about that stuff, and instead of talking about another character named Brian, who I will talk about later. And they're basically just annoyed about the fact that he doesn't want to join Roblox, because he thinks it's too childish. And even though they are technically friends with him, both of them have the agreement that Brian sucks. Then Rad mentions the fact that Brian has gotten good grades in school and that he's jealous about it, which devolves into a conversation of them talking about school. Izzy talks about how most of the kids at her school are rude, but there are some nice people here and there, and also how she doesn't think she's is very good at school, but Rad tries to give her support. And then at the very end, Rad discloses that he's not going to finish the recording because he thought Izzy was acting weird. After watching this entry, I get a vibe that both Rad and Izzy are good friends with each other behind all the teasing and everything. And it is nice when, you know, people in these ARGs have good friends. There is still the big question of what happened to Izzy's parents, because she just briefly mentions it and then we kind of move on without really asking much about it. So we're probably going to learn more about that as the ARG goes on. That's it for that video though, so let's move on to the next one, being called My Build in Roblox. Now, as much as I would like to, there's not very much to say about this upload, because in simple terms, it's just Rad wanting to show Izzy a build he made in Roblox so that way he could try and get front page. There is one good noteworthy thing about this upload though, and it's that Rad talks about how he didn't have much time to make this build because he only ever gets 2 hours to play on his computer. Rad's also jealous of Izzy because she gets no internet rules, which means she can be on the internet as long as she wants. And while Rad thinks that's cool, Izzy says that it's not as good as you might think it is. I think Izzy telling Rad this is a bit more towards a hint about what her life is like, and based on the last video, it does not sound very good. And then we got 2 really short videos in a row on the main channel, called Awareness for Ashwick Post and Announcement. In the awareness video, Rad talks about how he has stopped uploading because of the fact that there's weird people around his area, with there being an entire police report about it. Now don't worry, I'll talk about this police website later, but for now, we're just not going to worry about it. And in the announcement video, Rad clarifies that Izzy won't be appearing in any future videos because the 2 of them had a falling out. And just like with the police report, we will learn about this in just a little bit. And with those 2 short videos out of the way, we can now take a look at the final video on the channel called Argument. However, just before we talk about that video, let's give a brief rundown of the character Brian since we get introduced to him in this video. As Rad and Izzy said in the My Movie video, Brian doesn't really like Roblox because he thinks it's a bit of a childish game, and I'm not really sure if entirely he's on good terms with Lizzie, and as you'll come to find on this video, he's not a very good person. Now unfortunately, despite this being the longest video in the entire series, this video doesn't really have that much to write home about. As for the entire video, Rad and Brian are just playing a McDonald's obby on Roblox. Quick side note though, I remember I used to really love playing this game on Roblox. Like, even though I think it's really bad now, it's just, I remember having a lot of nostalgia for this game. I remember, like, watching Ethan Gamer TV and DNTM play. It was a very fun game at the time. But anyways, despite the little amount of things I have to talk about, the 2 things I do have to talk about with this video are very important. First of all, we can definitely see in this video how Rad and Brian are to each other as friends. I mean, when Rad and Lizzie had interactions, sure, they sometimes tease each other a little bit, but it felt like they did care for each other. But with Rad and Brian, they don't feel like they like each other at all, because at every chance they get, they'll make fun of each other no matter what. Though I feel like this shows more of Brian's character rather than Rad's character, as we've seen before with Rad that he was very nice to Izzy, so he clearly cares about having friendship. He just really does not like Brian. Now, if you briefly recall from the last video, Rad talked about how him and Izzy had a falling out. And in this video, Brian teases Rad with that exact information. Rad is very obviously upset by this, and he just really wants to move on from everything that's happened. And this is the reason why the video is named Argument, because they end up arguing about this whole thing. Now, it's really hard to make out what Brian's saying because of how blurry it is, but based on Rad's response, the most I can picture is that Brian is saying things that he done to Isabella and putting it onto Rad, like being jealous, obsessed, and a show-off towards her. And by the very end of the video, Rad doesn't even want to be friends with him anymore. So what we learned from this video is that we all hate Brian and no one should like him. I mean, seriously, teasing someone's falling out on their friend is genuinely one of the worst things you can do as a friend. Now, even though we've covered all the videos on the main channel, there's still one more thing we need to take a look at with this channel, and that's Rex's community posts. The first of these is a log between Izzy and Rad that took place on April 23rd, 2011. In here, Izzy basically apologizes to Rad because she wants to tell him more things, but he doesn't want him to get hurt from those things, and just generally wants to apologize for her behavior from the oldest 2 videos on the channel. Now, while I haven't talked about it yet, so Izzy probably saw both of these videos and wanted to apologize for how she's been acting towards Rad. This community post Rad made isn't really too much to write home about because it was just Rad teasing the announcement video that we already know about. The third post takes place on February 3rd, 2014, which is a conversation between Rad and Brian, with once again Brian just being an absolutely terrible friend. Like, I don't know why at this point Rad is still friends with him. Like, just stop being friends with this guy. He clearly is just so terrible. I've watched quite a few Senprista ARG videos, and I can tell you, this is probably takes the cake for one of Roblox's worst friends in an ARG. I mean, Brian knows that Rad is going through a tough time right now, and he just continues to make jokes at his expense instead of wanting to make him feel better about it. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, I hate Brian, and you should too. I also think this community post takes place after the newest upload on the channel, because they're still talking about Izzy like they did in the last upload. The fourth community post says that he's alone and that his friends left him, and while it's a bit sad that Izzy still left him, thank God that Brian left him, because Brian sucks. And this last community post seems a bit pointless because he says he gets locked out of his house, but then when Sammy asks if he's fine, he says that he's good because he got in now. So yeah, no clue what the point of this post was. And now we finish covering the main channel of XXRadXX. However, this ARG still goes way deeper than that, so let's keep digging. Now, there's actually something very important about this ARG that I've neglected to mention until now, and it's that if you look in the comment section of the videos My Build in Roblox and Announcement, 2 of the comments were made by a channel known as Voice in Worship. And the comments read, "Lying doesn't help you, Isabel," and "We won, Isabel." These comments are not directed towards Rad, and instead directed towards Izzy, since Isabel is her actual name in real life. Within the context of the videos, I think the lying comment refers to the fact that Izzy was probably lying to Rad in some parts of the video, and which is why maybe Rad suspected that she was acting a bit weird. We saw that Rad thought her parents died, but maybe that was a lie too. And the announcement video, whoever is behind the channel was probably trying to separate Rad and Izzy to begin with, and they finally managed to do that. I'll save that for the end of the video though. For now, let's talk about the 4 videos on the channel of Voice in Worship. And of course, we'll start by taking a look at the first video on the channel, Prologue. At the beginning of the video, there's some blurry Morse code, which while is very hard to make out, there was someone in the comments of this video that managed to kind of translate what it said, which while it probably isn't an exact translation, is still, something, so thank you to this person. After the Morse code, there's text that says, "Your fate has come, Isabel," which is then followed by more text that says, "We hope you don't fall the same fate as Clement and April." And then a few seconds after we get that text, 2 pictures show up for a few seconds, which I can only assume are Clement and April. And then the video ends with text saying, "Don't try and hide again, we will always find you." And along with the video, there was a comment by Voice in Worships that was in Morse code. And when translated, it says, "Although the games have not begun, we still have time to start our fun." Okay, if you couldn't tell by this first video, this channel's a cult. And based on this first upload, it seems as if Izzy was a part of this cult at some point, and she eventually escaped from it. And they're trying to find her right now. And we had mentioned that 2 other members of the cult, Clement and April, have tried to do the same thing, except they have been caught. And most likely had very severe consequences. However, we'll get back to that at the end of the video, whereas for now, we're gonna take a look at the next video, Time is Irrelevant. Once the video begins, we get 3 pieces of text that say, "Our time is nearly over, hasn't this little game of the past been so fun, and the present is waiting." Then we cut to 3 figures representing humans, with 2 of them being shot and 1 of them staying alive. And the video ends with text saying, "You are last and we will meet you soon." From the last video, it seems very obvious to me that these 3 characters represent Clement, April, and Izzy, with Izzy being the only one now alive of the 3. And of course, this whole theme of time and games is about how they're about to find Izzy and probably give her the same punishment as the other 2. Not too much we don't already know, with a few little extra information, so let's move on to the next video, which is a jumble of words. However, just before we talk about the video itself, I want to briefly talk about the title and the description of the video. You see, in the description, we get this kind of link thing, and when you put it into Google, it just brings up a bunch of Caesar ciphers. However, just under that, it says, "The words speak in 9. So by taking the title, putting it in a Caesar cipher, and shifting the words by 9, you get the word passage. Anyways, the video itself is just text with some stuff saying, "Getting tired, it's time to find more." The clue is in this audio, and pushing him away only makes it harder. Now, within the XXRad ARG itself, I have no idea who actually made this, because with the text that's being put on screen, it doesn't really feel like it was made by the cult members. However, I still think this is a video for Izzy because of the last sentence, "pushing him away makes it harder," which is probably referring to Rad, as in him. Also, remember how they said the clue is in this audio? Well, they weren't lying. By turning the video into an MP3 file and then putting it through a spectrogram, you get this. Now, this is supposed to be a YouTube link, and while I can make out most of the letters, I can't make out everything, so I'm kind of at a loss as to what I'm supposed to do here. If anyone knows the correct combination to this link, that would be greatly appreciated if you put it in the comments. And with all this stuff to talk about with that video done, let's move on to the final video on the channel, Confusion, Denial, and Destruction. And you know, we're gonna actually watch this video in full because it's an actual full conversation between Rad and Izzy. So, here it is.
Hey Izzy, I noticed you have been on Roblox or Skype recently, so I want to check in on you. Me and Brian, well, I'm just really worried. Please get back to me when you can, okay? Hey Rad, I noticed your voice message, and I just wanted to say, I just can't do this friendship anymore. What? Izzy, did I do something wrong? Did Brian do something wrong? Trust me, what he says isn't serious. No, it's nothing to do with you or Brian, as much as I don't like him. It's just, well, I need a break to focus on my own problems. And you two won't help. Bro, what did I do?
Now, if you remember the announcement video, Rad said that him and Izzy split up because of a falling out they had, and I think it's pretty clear that this is the falling out that he was talking about. Izzy said she needed a break from the project because she felt as if she needed to deal with her own problems that Rad and Brian weren't helping her with. But Rad still thinks that he might have done something wrong based on the way she's talking to him. I'll discuss it more at the end of the video, but this is definitely an important video to keep in mind. And the description says, dishing everyone to save yourself, consequently opening up your borders, evil will come and your regrets will arise. I think what the description is trying to say is that with her distancing herself from Rad and Brian, she thought that she might be able to more easily get away from the cult. However, by doing this, she unintentionally made herself more vulnerable to the cult finding her than she thought. And because of this, she's gonna regret what she just said to Rad. And now, that was every single video on the Voice and Worship channel. However, just before we can piece this whole story together, we gotta take a look at one more thing. Now, there's an entire aspect to this ARG that I've refused to talk about until now, and that is the external websites that are a part of it. So let's go back to all the different channels and take a look at the websites that are associated with them. So the first of these websites we can take a look at is in the awareness video when he talks about the police report. And in the description of the video, Rad put the link for the website that he was showcasing throughout the video. Now, I can't go through every single little detail on this website, so I'll just go through what I believe to be the most important things to talk about. So the date in which this police report was taken on was on September 26, 2014. We know from most of Rad's old videos that they took place in 2011, however this takes place 2 years after those two original videos on the channel. The people behind this crime are also a part of a cult called the Children of Nuthiel, with the supposed leader of this cult being Amber Hale, the preacher. Also, there's a phone number on screen, but I didn't really want to call any phone numbers, so if you guys want to call phone numbers and find out some more lore, then go ahead. And I think Amber Hale, who specifically investigated the area that Izzy lives at, is probably the person behind the Voice and Worship channel. The person who has been threatening Izzy to come back to the cult through her channel. The next 3 websites we can all find by looking in the description of the awareness video, where Izzy herself comments on it, saying that Rad should be careful about posting this website onto the channel, with Rad even responding to it and just saying that it's for a video. So by taking a look at her channel and going to her About page, we see that she has a MySpace and Tumblr account. Starting with her MySpace account, there's 3 different blog posts we can take a look at. The first of these is a post called It's a New World Out There, where she's talking about how she had to move because of problems with her parents, so now she's living with her grandparents, and sadly has to move away from her best friend. Izzy has already mentioned how she's moved before, so this probably isn't referring to Rad when she says her best friend. The next one is a post called I'm Worried, where she's worried about something that her parents are doing in her community. I'll piece together what this could be referring to later. Then she made one final post called Stupid Stuff Again, where she's talking about how her parents are doing something weird again, and that all the people in her community are dressed up in ugly cloaks. Now, based on most of the clues that we've gathered here, it seems as if that Izzy's parents were a big part of the cult, which is why in the A New World Out There post, she left with her grandparents, since her parents are part of the cult and she doesn't want to be associated with them anymore. Also, I find it worth pointing out that under her books in her profile, the one book she read was The Hollow Crown of Nothiel by the Umbral Circle of the Void Crown. I just wanted to bring that up because I bet the cult made her read that. And then of course there's her Tumblr account, which has very little to talk about, but I'm gonna bring it up anyways. And I say there's very little to talk about because the only things she ever posted were an introduction to herself and one other post that says, having a friend start talking to you after 11 years is so eerie. Okay, now if you remember from earlier, I said that there was 3 external places we could go to through Izzy's channel. And that's because if we go to her community tab, she gives a link to a Google Doc. And putting in the URL takes us to 3 different journal entries from Izzy. So we're gonna start by talking them in order, starting with Dreams, which was made on March 2nd, 2025. It talks about how Izzy has been having nightmares about some stuff from her childhood, and there are some things from her childhood that she's experiencing now, like cloaked people following her around, similar to members of the cult, and they somehow know her name and her parents' professions. Now, I still kind of believe that at one point Izzy's parents were part of the cult, and maybe she was too young when she left the cult to know that she was part of it. However, this entry acts like she didn't know that they were part of a cult, despite the fact that in every other entry, if they were part of the cult, she acts like that they were. However, I'm still gonna stick to the idea that her and her parents were part of the cult, because maybe, like, her parents drifted away from the cult at one point and went into their own professions. Because to me, her being a part of the cult at one point is the only explanation that makes sense to me. The next journal entry someday that was taken on April 5th, 2025 is about how Izzy finally got to see Rad after a really long time. And this entry might tie into her one Tumblr post she had about finally seeing a friend after 11 years. And she talked about how Rad has changed and looks a bit different and everything. However, she also brings up Brian. Rad said he didn't show up because of some stupid reason, and she wants to know, like, if he maybe changed or if he looks any different. And the biggest point of if he has a family. Now, part of me kind of came up with the idea that maybe Brian is also part of the cult, since both now and before he rarely seemed to do anything. However, there's not really that much to go off of if he is, so I don't really want to say right now if he is or is not part of it, because he might not be. And then the final entry, titled Someone Else, was taken on July 15th, 2025, where in this one, Izzy talks about how she found a TikTok creator that's been harassed by an account called Voice in Worship, which we already know about, and Izzy actually knows about this account. However, she hasn't really found out that it's part of the cult because she doesn't understand the correlation between the two of them. So I'm suspecting that the reason why this Voice in Worship account is going after both of them is because both of them were a part of the cult at one point. It just only makes sense. Now that's it for the journal entries, but there's one more thing we can take a look at, and that's the website that Voice in Worship has on their community tab, with, funnily enough, the website itself being named after Izzy's YouTube channel. And going to this website, we get taken to a page called The Umbral Circle of the Void Crown, which, if you remember, was a similar book to what we saw Izzy read on her MySpace account. Now, the website itself is about 4 different entries of the Nothiel cult. However, I'm just going to take a look at one, as the others don't seem as important and are more so just backstory of the cult itself. And it's this one called Echoes of the Crown, which talk about a girl who will shatter the crown, get isolated from everyone she knows, and be followed by many people, which, if you've been following throughout this entire ARG so far, is exactly the same story that Izzy has been going through. She betrayed the cult by leaving them, she isolated herself from all of her friends, and even now, in the year 2025, she's still being followed by weird people. However, that's not all for this website, as if you go to the page with the 4 different options, there's a secret 5th option that shows up when you highlight a certain one, and by clicking on it, you get taken to a secret database. Talks about a few things that we already know about, like Amber Hale being the leader, and Izzy being associated. However, it also gives us the information that the Cult of Neil was started back in 1998, and that they tried to summon him to gain some energy of some kind. However, that's not all there is to this website, as if we try and make the website error somehow, we get the 404 error message, but by clicking the 404, we get a conversation between a few people. In it, we can see 4 different users talk about a myth called Noel, which is the same god that the cult is worshipping. The myth is that Noel will kill anyone who buys the Void Crown, which is a crown you can buy on Roblox, by the way, and it will also hack and steal everyone's limiteds. Though for the most part, people kind of just believe that it was a myth started by some weird people. However, for whatever reason, one of the users was blocked from saying anything about it. And to top off this website's secrets, if you click Roblox Corporation at the bottom, you get taken to more conversations between more people. And they once again talk more about this Neil God, about how he was a scary story made up by noobs, that he's an actual god that's in textbooks. There was a news article about him at one point, and at some point there was just a bunch of stuff related to him that got deleted off the internet. While he is definitely a significant part to the ARG since he's the reason why the cult exists in the first place, I don't think there's really that much of a point to mention him too much anyways. Like, obviously it's important to mention him, but I'm not going to mention him too much because he doesn't really play that much of a plot in terms of the rest of this ARG. Also, just editing this in for later, but I completely forgot to mention that in one part of this website you can find a conversation between Rad and Lizzie, where Rad introduces Lizzie to Roblox, so I'll make sure to put that a part of the timeline at the end of the video. Yeah, just wanted to say that. And with that, we have covered every single thing that there is within the XX Rad ARG. Now, of course, this ARG is just starting out, which means that there's still going to be a lot more coming this way. In fact, as I was making this video, they actually released a new video, like, a few days ago. The reason I didn't really bring it up, though, is because there's not really much to it, because this is just Brad and Brian playing Roblox. Unlike every other entry, it doesn't really feel like there's any, like, lore added onto it. However, while I won't be talking about that video in full, one thing I wanted to do just before I end this video is make a full timeline of events of this whole ARG. I will pull it up in just a sec, and I will use this pointy finger to represent what I'm talking about. The story starts in 1998, where the Cult of Nothiel began by Amber Hale, and they made their first major incident. Following that was the year 2000, where more cultish activity began surfacing around them. Then 2003, Izzy has some major events to talk about with the cult, and also she's witness to a ritual that they are hosting. Then 2007, more incidences related to the cult begin, and Izzy moves from the cult. Then in 2010, people talk about the Nothiel myth on Roblox and how if you buy the Void Crown, you will get killed by them. And then in 2011, many things happened, like some more cult activity, Rad introducing Izzy to Roblox, and Rad uploading his first 2 videos on the channel. Then in 2012, more people keep talking about the Nothiel myth on Roblox. Then in 2014, the cult invades the place that Rad and Izzy live in, and Izzy cuts herself off from Rad, and Rad has to continue making videos with Brian. In 2015, Rad talks about how he's isolated from all of his friends now. And then in 2015, we have Izzy's journal entries and Tumblr post, along with the Voice and Worship account threatening her. And that's mostly everything I have to say about the XX Rad ARG. I think this ARG actually has potential to go somewhere in the future, and I like how it kind of focuses more on the main character's friend than the main character itself. Though I do kind of wish that Rad got expanded on a little bit more, because he feels a bit of like a blank slate right now. But hey, this is a message to the XX Rad creator. Keep up the good work. You're doing a great job. Anyways, I probably might not cover this ARG again, so I recommend that you go check it out when new uploads start coming up. So yeah, go to subscribe to them, I'll add them in the description and in the title, and yeah, just go check out their stuff. And if you watched all the way to the end, thank you so much for doing that. If you enjoyed this video, then please like it, and if you want to see more of my content, and you don't want to miss another upload, click subscribe and hit the bell. And if you want more people to see this video, then please hype it. I'd very appreciate that. And once again, go check out XXRadXX. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.